This one time I went on a holiday with some friends and I brought along the Toradora manga issue 4, the issue that contains the story arc that we are going to analyse today. And a friend of mine saw the book and joked about me bringing hentai along on this holiday. I had a chuckle, my friends had a chuckle. She opened it up to a totally random page, and it just had to be one that validated that claim. Anyway, as that story was the beginning of my holiday, so too shall it be the beginning of this analysis.
Most story arcs going forward will typically choose a core character to act as its sole protagonist. The other characters will still be present, they may even play a key role in the story, but the arc itself will be predominantly focused on the growth of its protagonist. For this arc, the protagonist is clearly Taiga. I figured this out by working backwards from the climax, and it makes sense. The core conflict revolves around her, and she is the one to have a revelation by the end. We begin where the last arc left us, with Ami coming on to Ryuji and Taiga walking in on the act. Upon entering this scene, Taiga has a revelation, one that she is none too pleased about. Remember the last arc where Ami threatened to take Ryuji away and she didn't take it seriously? Well here, as far as Taiga is concerned, Ami is trying to do just that. And despite Ryuji's disinclination towards her advances, he is clearly still giving her the same kind of support that he had been giving to Taiga. It almost makes her feel insignificant that Ryuji would provide this kind of support to anyone besides her. She was under the impression that Ryuji had a particular soft spot for her, but it turns out that he may see her the same way he does anyone else. This presents us with the central conflict for this arc, Taiga feeling as though she may lose Ryuji. This is quickly swept aside as the conflict of the individual episode becomes clear. Taiga is insecure about the size of her breasts. Now, I could delve into the realistic validity of such an insecurity, but alas, I have never been and will likely never be a teenage girl, so I wouldn't know. What's important to keep in mind about Taiga's insecurity is that it has been externally contributed to. She has been made fun of for her breast size by others, which adds weight to the insecurity and further drives her isolation from her classmates. Ryuji begins to figure this out while he, Taiga, Minori and Ami are shopping for swimsuits. Yes, the show does drool over Ami, a 16 to 17-year-old girl in a swimsuit, making sure to graphically depict every curve and bump of her figure. And yes, as always, I see these shots as distasteful, gross fan pandering of the lowest caliber. I know I tend to harp on this kind of thing, but there's a scene later where Taiga pokes Yasu's boob and it doesn't come with nearly as much disgusting cringe factor, because Yasu is an adult and the act is clearly played for comedy and not titillation. I'm not against explicit moments in anime, just explicit moments that involve sexualizing children. Despite initially reaching out to Ryuji for help on the matter of her swimsuit, Taiga is still reluctant to open up about what is bothering her. She almost comes clean in the store, but ultimately brushes the issue aside. Even later when Ryuji is asking what her problem is, Taiga tries to throw him off by giving him a false justification for her bad mood, her lack of ability in swimming. Ryuji knows immediately that this isn't what's bothering her. He is one of the few people who could easily see through a cover-up like this, even if he was wrong about it being a flat-out lie. When Ryuji does figure out what has Taiga so upset, she is initially distraught, but this serves as a band-aid tear-off kind of situation. Sure, it was unpleasant in that instant, but now the worst part is over. Following this, Taiga shows real vulnerability to Ryuji, showing him what she means about her swimsuit not fitting, showing him the picture that exacerbated her insecurity, and when she explains why she is so worried about being flat-chested, she does so with such authenticity that Ryuji has no problems believing her. Taiga, violent, dominant, bratty Taiga, is opening up to Ryuji in a way that she couldn't do with anyone else, not even Minori. Ryuji goes above and beyond being an emotional support and decides to do something practical about Taiga's situation, just as she had done for him in the first arc. Again, I will not be commenting on Ryuji's solution and whether or not it is a healthy choice, as I am uneducated in this regard. However, I will point out the irony that Taiga's main motivation was looking attractive to Kitamura, who is literally incapable of noticing any difference due to his poor eyesight. In an ultimate show of camaraderie, when Ami throws Taiga into the pool against her will, not only is Ryuji the first to realize that something is wrong, but no one else even notices until Ryuji's cries get their attention. Being the first to get to her, his loyalty is put to the ultimate test when he realizes that one of her fake breasts has fallen out, and he has to put it back in to calm her down and spare her the embarrassment of being caught.
So remember when I said that my friend opened up the manga to the worst possible page? Yeah.
Surprisingly, Taiga seemingly understands that Ryuji did what he had to do, and while she is clearly embarrassed, her aggression is aimed solely at Ami, as though she trusts that Ryuji had no ulterior motive. Again, Taiga, the girl who once kicked him in the gut for a perceived slight, has enough trust in Ryuji that it doesn't even occur to her to get mad at him. The second conflict for this arc is revealed as Ami invites Ryuji to her beach house for summer break, a proposition that inherently plays into Taiga's fear of losing him. It is ultimately decided that his participation in this summer getaway will be determined by a competition. Ami's suggestion of a 50-meter freestroke race beats out Taiga's suggestion of Veil Tudo. Yikes. The emotional weight of this second conflict is initially set up by Ami, who reveals her secondary motivation for taking Ryuji away to Taiga when they agree on the terms of the bet. You're going to be on your lonesome all summer long. This conflict is amplified by Taiga's classmates who do not believe that she has any chance to beat Ami in this race. This is emphasized in the next pool scene and on a note that is passed around their class. Despite the odds, Ryuji bets on Taiga to win, putting his money where his mouth is in regards to his faith in her, and puts nearly all of his free time into training her. In this situation where even we as an audience can't help but wonder about her odds, Ryuji is the only ally she has that believes in her without question and helps her to fulfill her desire for victory. However, the most tense conflict for this episode, and arguably the arc altogether, comes from Ryuji and his insistence on guessing why Taiga wants to win this competition so bad. He guesses that it's to impress Kitamura or to get back at Ami, but he is so wrong on this front that even Ami calls him out on it. Taiga is insistent that these reasons are not true, but always backs down as to avoid stating her own motivation, which she doesn't completely understand. When Ryuji guesses that she is doing it for him, he says he already understands that, but then goes on to list the facilities and conveniences she would lose if he were to disappear. Ryuji seems to be under the impression that Taiga's reliance on him solely comes down to the chores he does for her, which was probably somewhat fed by Minori attributing his value to his willingness to do those things. But Taiga doesn't feel that way. She knows that it's more than that, even if she doesn't quite get what it is. Ryuji's promise to prepare all her meals ahead of time if he does have to go to the beach house further exacerbates Taiga's worst fear, that she really could lose Ryuji. With this thought becoming more and more prevalent in her mind, Taiga decides that she doesn't want to win, that if Ryuji really sees her as a burden, then he might as well just go with Ami. It turns out that Ryuji could have some unknown feelings as well. When he hands Taiga her lunch the next day, he tells her that he wants her to win the race, and instinctively goes to add something more. If I were to speculate, I would say that he cares for her more than he really understands, and was about to express that care in words before realizing that he couldn't, and in the grand scheme of the story, he doesn't have to. When Taiga realizes that the lunch he had cooked for her was all meat, she comes to realize that even if Ryuji is capable of caring for other people, he and she still share a connection that is exclusive to them. That he has been spending all of his time helping her and has now fulfilled her most unnecessary request, just to show how much he believes in her. Unlike Kitamura, who partly justifies his belief in Taiga through the belief Ryuji has in her, or Minori, who as a referee is forced to remain impartial, Ryuji is completely, unquestionably on her side. And it makes sense that Ryuji would feel this way. When we see his classmates get rough with him, I can't help but look back to that first scene where his classmates were terrified of being anywhere near him. This change in attitude was started by Taiga, the only other person who understood his struggle and did something practical about it. During the race, we get one last instance of Ryuji putting his faith in Taiga, letting her continue despite the pain she is in after developing a leg cramp. Now you might be wondering why I'm bashing you all over the head with how reliable an ally Ryuji is, or why the show would go to such lengths to make sure we know this about him. Well, when Ryuji is injured and nearly drowns, we get our answer. As well as the risk of losing Ryuji to Ami, Taiga has now nearly lost him altogether. Everyone else was so distracted by Ami and the race that had Taiga not noticed he was under, there's a chance no one would have until it was too late. This is the story of Ryuji's life, invisible and isolated, and that is what makes him such a sympathetic ally to Taiga, because she is the same way. When she was drowning, Ryuji was the first to notice, and no one else would have if he hadn't called her name. In this moment, she realizes that for now, Ryuji is all she has. He is the only one that she can be vulnerable around, confide in, rely on, even when she feels like she doesn't deserve it, and that believes in her, no questions asked. So when everyone else suddenly shows an interest in Ryuji, the way Ami suddenly did in the last arc, trying to help him after they nearly let him die, Taiga rejects the notion that any of them care. In a fit of emotional rage, she goes off on a tirade about how little anyone did. Even if Taiga doesn't completely understand her feelings, she does know for sure that she will not lose Ryuji. Not to Ami, not to her classmates, not to anyone. Ryuji's mine. Keep your damn hands off him. In the final scene of this episode, in which the characters plan the trip that will make up the next arc of the story, Taiga seemingly walks back on this bold declaration, framing it as a show of dominance over Ryuji. However, we as an audience know that this dominance act has been a front ever since episode 2, when she lambasted him for acting like an equal while actually appreciating the sentiment. I'd argue that Taiga doesn't understand this, likely using the dominance angle to contextualize the outburst for herself as well as the others. So over the course of this arc, Taiga has come to terms with the fact that Ryuji can be taken from her, and that he well may allow it, as he sees Taiga as someone who values his services over his companionship. As Ryuji comes to understand that this is not the case, Taiga becomes more and more tense about her situation, until the defining moment where she is shown once and for all that all they really have is each other. And in this moment she makes her intentions clear. No one is separating them, no one is getting in between them, no one is cutting either of them out of the other's lives. And that is it for this analysis. I'd like to thank my patrons, Orion Tran, Quincy Chamberlain, Jaman5 and Lars Espen. If you want a credit in each video, exclusive monthly updates and a special Discord role, why not become a patron? Or for more general updates, outtakes, and a community of friendly anime nerds, you can join the Behind Big Joe Discord server. Links for both are in the description. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.